Hey, welcome tonight. Glad that you're all here. My name is Steve, one of the pastors here at Hope, and welcome tonight. To be honest with you, this was kind of a hard week. I kind of started out the week; it was going well until Monday, and then Monday started out well, and then Monday night, I do as any good father would do when Carol, who's the normal one that likes to cook. I'm not just saying she cooks because that's what women do, but she likes to cook, and so when she doesn't cook, the men folk tend to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. And so that's what we were doing. We went to Buffalo Wild Wings, Cal and I. We were hanging out there and having a great time, really good time, and came back out to my truck and sat in there and noticed there's a lot of broken glass. Somebody had busted into my truck and had stolen my briefcase, which had my laptop in it and a bunch of other stuff and all that kind of deal. And so it's kind of like, oh, no. I mean, it is just stuff. And fortunately, even the laptop was Hope's. And so it, let me finish the sentence. So it's covered in Hope's insurance, and it's all taken care of. That's what I was trying to say. But but it's just that whole thing of identity, your identity theft kind of a deal. And so I had some checks in there and had a couple credit cards and a few things in your computer. If they can hack into your computer, right, they got everything. And so I don't think that's the case, but so I spent the next many hours from probably 8 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning, and then the next day just changing myself online. I have went through an internet complete virtual newness. I have been reborn. I have had an internet colonoscopy. I am completely different online now. You have to, so you just avoid those kind of things. And so that was exhausting. It still is. I'm still dealing with a couple things, auto pays and that kind of a deal and whatever else. It's still kind of getting itself worked out. But so it's kind of Monday. And I'm working on this Tuesday morning because there's certain things I have to call during business hours because you can't deal with certain things, certain credit card companies. As a matter of fact, it was amazing. I won't say which one, Menards, but if you call them, they say call back the next day. And it's like, but my credit card was stolen. That doesn't matter. We're not here. It's like, okay. Anyway, so I guess they're closed. What are you going to do with the Menards? It's not a Visa or anything. But anyway, I like Menards. If you work there, it's a great place. So I'm dealing with all this kind of stuff on Tuesday morning, and I get a phone call from John Neal, and we're dealing with different things insurance-wise and trying to understand exactly what was in the briefcase so we could, make a claim and all those kind of things back and forth. We're doing some of those things, and then he gives me a call and says, "Chief, I got bad." He has to call me Chief. I guess there's worse things. What do you call me not to my face? Anyway, he says I got some bad news, and Monday night, Pastor William Berg passed away. And so if you've been following this at all, if you know anything about this, Pastor William, I believe it is Berg, was pastor of Augustana Lutheran Church right next door for many years, and then he retired, and then there were pastors after that, but he was kind of been a fixture there. He was 102 years old, had a legacy in this city of doing all kinds of amazing ministries and different things. And through this process, I've known him for years, but through this process of now acquiring their building, we have become closer. And he is a strong Lutheran who absolutely head over heels is in love with Jesus. And we just got a kinship with him, and we're very excited and gave out an invitation to have him be the first preacher at the new building over there as it's remodeled. On its 130th anniversary, we're giving it a facelift, big facelift, and we wanted him to have that opportunity. And so anyway, so he didn't make it for that, and he was actually asking God for life. I got one of his letters that says, I'm ready to go. Just think, with 102, you've lived out your contemporaries. You've lived out many of your contemporaries' children. And 102 years old, and he says, I'm ready to go. But I'm asking the Lord to give me life to be able to do this. And so we were real excited about that and trying to get it done. I even said something last week about this, and we actually were, we had heard that his health was going down a little bit, but it must have went real rapidly because we didn't even get a phone call. And we had planned to go tomorrow and to videotape him just in case, he wasn't. We hoped to be in the building June, July, something like that, and we'd hoped for that. So that was hard. I'm going to be honest, that was real hard. And then he's quite a guy. He lived an awful long time. He wrote no books until he was 80, I believe 86. And then he wrote like 13 or something. It's amazing. And the last one, and I've been reading it. It's a great book. It's just a simple book, but it's a great book. And it's just Whatever Happened to Sin and Grace. And he talks about Jesus. He just talks about Jesus and everything. And he had this big booming voice, Jesus, And it's just a beautiful, beautiful man. He planned his own funeral. He did this many years ago. That's, I guess, what good pastors do. They plan their own funerals. And he asked a contemporary of his to do the funeral. That pastor died. So he asked another pastor to do it. That pastor also died. He asked another pastor to do it. That pastor also died. He's telling me this story, and I said, no, I will not do your funeral. There's no way I am on that list, pal. And 102 even laughed at that. It was beautiful. And then John gives me a call back. Lady says, you are not going to believe this. But in the mail today, we received William Berg's, Pastor Berg's Christmas letter. A little late, or early, I guess you could say. But he dropped us a Christmas card that he gave out, and there's great pictures on the back. You can't see it but one is he's actually playing golf at 102, riding a golf cart, and he's with his grandsons and his great-granddaughter over there. And he writes it very nice, very nice. Let me read part of this to you because it's so beautiful. He says, a special Christmas reminder to many friends who are suffering burdens or illness or sorrow, especially if they are grieving over loved ones who have been taken from them. I remind you of our Lord's reassuring promise in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. On the day after his death, he died Monday night, we get a letter from him comforting us, telling us how to be comforted in his death. That is just the kind of guy he was. He goes on to say, I praise and thank God for his divine grace that supports me day by day. He uses a walker, clinics, doctors, nurses, oxygen, and above all, a loving family. He is so good to me. At my age of 102, he is still giving me ministries to fulfill for his glory. Then he says, a special invitation for you. So he writes this to people all over the country. And he says, I've been invited to preach the sermon Easter Sunday morning at Hope Community Church if the renovation of the former Augustana Sanctuary is complete. We'd hoped to have it done by Easter, but of course everything got moved back a little bit. And so this would have been then done in June. It would be a great blessing for me to greet you there. So he invites everybody to that. And so when I got that, I wept. I mean, it was a lot going on already with me, and then just to hear this, I just wept. And then John calls me back, and I've said, John, stop calling me. Mostly it's bad news today, so stop calling me. He says, you are not going to believe this, Chief. You're not going to believe this. Pastor Berg knew his health was declining, and he wrote his sermon already for us. So, we don't know the delivery mechanism yet, but somehow when we open that building, Pastor Berg is going to be the first voice that we, not his real voice, but what his thoughts were. We're not sure how we're going to do that. The funeral is going to be this next Saturday. I'll let you know if it's open to the public. I don't know what kind of seating and all that. We'll put it on the city if it is. If it's not, I can't do that. I don't want to overwhelm this, whatever the space is. But it'll be next Saturday, and they've given us permission to do a lot of filming and different things at that and kind of put together a memorial video for Pastor Berg and the family. We don't know. We may have one of the sons come in, and I got to thinking about that, and the sons are 70-something. I mean, that's how old the sons would be, right? And so we're not sure the delivery mechanism yet, but I was just, again, that just choked me up, and that it's a beautiful thing. He has written the sermon already. So I barely have sermons written before we go. I mean, they call them Saturday night specials, I mean, you'll stay up late on Saturday the night before, so giddy up. So anyway, all right, if you're brand new with us, we're in a series in the book of Genesis. Normally on third service, we give you the opportunity to ask questions. Tonight we got a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to take Q&A. I'll just stick around afterwards. We just really have a lot of ground to cover tonight, so I'm just going to kind of move that or cut that so we can get through it. If we're moving quite a bit quick pace through the book of Genesis, we're not obviously going verse by verse like we go through a lot of books. We are covering the big things, and we are in the last 2 weeks. This week and next week, and we're done with the book of Genesis. It's been a really great ride. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. So if you got a Bible with you, or if you want to check on your fancy-dancy device there and get her to Genesis 38 or so, that's about where we're going to be getting after. Genesis 37 was where we left off last week, and we talked about Joseph. Remember Abraham, this promise to start this nation of Israel comes in the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings, and Abraham comes on the scene. God chooses him, nothing special about the guy. He just chooses this guy. Abraham turns out to be a guy that God shows favor to. Abraham believes God through some crazy circumstances, although Abraham himself made significant mistakes. All throughout the book of Genesis, we see significant mistakes in people's lives. The book is rife with people making huge errors. And so you see that over and over and over and over and over. And we see it here. We get Abraham. He has Isaac. Isaac has two sons, Jacob and Esau. The promise is going to go through Jacob, so it's given to Jacob. Jacob then has 12 sons, super dysfunction, 12 sons out of 4 different women, 4 wives, and it's a mess how they all get involved in this. The 12 sons range in ages all over the map, and it's an unbelievably dysfunctional family. If you just look at it, we've been looking at that for a few weeks here, how the whole Jacob thing was dysfunctional, the marriages were dysfunctional, and then the kids just add to the mess of the whole deal. Last week, we looked at how all these brothers, there's 12 of them, the second to youngest is a guy by the name of Joseph. Joseph, maybe doesn't have the best discretion. He shares with them some of his dreams that he has about how they're going to bow down to him. Probably not the best thing for the second to youngest to kind of be saying, but he goes ahead and says it, and they all get angry with him. Plus, he is daddy's favorite, clearly. He even gives him this special coat or dream coat or whatever you call it. He gets this special jacket, and the other ones realize, hey, let's take him out. So they want to kill him. One of the brothers, who is no noble saint by any stretch of the imagination, the name is Reuben. Reuben's messed up. We saw him. He's actually goes in, and it just says that he sleeps with one of the 4 mothers, sister wives? What are you going to call them? I don't know. One of the 4 moms, not his, at least, just someone else. And so it's a weird deal. But Reuben, in this case, seems to be a good guy. And he says, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in a well, in a cistern. So they said, okay, they do that. Then one of the other brothers, named Judah, he was a graduate of the Carlson School of Management. He says, wait a minute, there's no money to be made here. There you go. One. There we go. So, what's the ROI? What's the ROI on this, right? There's nothing. Return on investment for you non-business people. There's nothing here. Let's get money from them. So they see these Ishmaelites, and they're going on the way to Egypt, and they sell them for 20 shekels of silver. And so they take him, and they are going to sell him into slavery. He then gets brought down into Egypt, and the end of Genesis 37 says that Potiphar, they sell him to Potiphar, a guy by the name of Potiphar. We'll see that more today. Now, last week I did something, covered quite a bit of ground. He called it Meanwhile Back at the Ranch, because Genesis was kind of bouncing all over the place a little bit. I want to do that again, but it only is 1 chapter. It is, again, one of those accounts that is shocking that it's even in the Bible. I got to be honest, if I was writing the Bible and I was trying to convince you to follow a religion, I would never put Genesis 38 in there. No way. No way would I put Genesis 38 in there. I mean, it's like, really? Genesis 38 is the corner of dysfunction and unbelievable selfishness, okay? So here we're going to see this. Now, I was just going to tell you about it. It's so graphic, I'd probably get fired just to tell you about it. So what I'm going to do is just read it, then just say it's in the Bible, okay? It's easier just to read it, to be honest with you, than to actually go ahead and do it. So I'm going to read, I'm going to skip a few verses to save some time, but if you got your Bible open, here we go. Genesis 30, starting in the beginning of the chapter. At that time, Judah, that's one of the brothers, at the time, that means at the time that Joseph got sold into slavery, at that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. Now it's interesting. He meets her, you can see it. He marries her and lay with her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who is named We'll get back to all this in just a second. Now, let's just see what's happening here. We got to stop and smell the air. What's going on? Judah decides to leave. He leaves the area. It's not clear if he's leaving for good. But then he meets this guy to stay with this buddy of his, Hira, whoever he is. There he meets this daughter of a Canaanite woman, so that's a no-no, okay? He is not supposed to marry outside the clan, okay? He's supposed to stay within the family, not immediate family. He's supposed to stay, though, within the family. I know that's weird, and down, here in America, we'd call that like Kentucky or something, or Wisconsin. Sorry, I don't know. But you don't do that. Well, here, they were trying to create a bloodline, and this was very important to have this certain people, and so they were not allowed to marry outside of it. So then he marries this woman. We never know her name. All we know that her name is daughter of Shua. That's it. Okay? He married her, and she became pregnant. Must have been an unexpected pregnancy, because when asked, what do you want to name the kid, he says, Yeah, thank you. She conceived again. Now, it's interesting what the Bible is very interested in details, and then there's no details. Had a baby. Boom. Had a baby. Next one. She conceived again. Okay. Wow, that's happening quick. And gave birth to a son, named him Onan. A few more letters here. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezeb that she gave birth to him. So we got 3 sons. Got it? Onan, Shelah. Got it? Clear. All right. Now, Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar or Tamar. I always say Tamar, but however you want to say it, okay? But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. I'm sure there's a whole mini-series you could write about but he only gets one sentence. He's wicked, he dies. Again, the Bible's interested in telling a story for a point. It's a beautiful thing to walk through the narrative portion of Scriptures, because it's not just telling you history, it's telling you with a point. And so you're not interested. Yeah, I am. I'd love to know why. That's not the point here, okay? Here's the point. Then Judah said to Onan, remember you got 3 kids. You got you got Onan, you got Shelah. Dies, all right? He says to Onan, second son, lie with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother. Now, hold on. Again, that is really weird to us, okay? That's not okay. All right, just don't, I'm doing this because it's in the Bible. Don't do that. This is a deal called a levirate tradition. And here's what would happen. If a brother would die, and there were unmarried brothers, being a widow in that culture was so unbelievably difficult and financially created a hardship, and there was no heir. The heir went through the sons. Okay, so what the levirate tradition is this son, the next son in line, had to marry her and produce offspring. Now, the reason for that, and it's going to make sense then, what's going on here is when the tradition would say that each son got an equal share, or perhaps, as some would say, that if there are 3 sons, there's actually, you divide it into add 1, so there'd be 4, and then the oldest son would get the double portion, okay? So this oldest son would get 2/4, 1/2, and these other ones would get 1/4. And let's just, for the sake of argument, say maybe that isn't the case. They're going to get 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, all right? The one dies, and the other 2 are going, score. I just gained quite a few goats, all right? Then no longer do I have to divide it amongst 3. I divide it amongst 2. Onan might even be saying, aha, now I'm the eldest. Giddy up. I'm going to get a double share, all right? So what the idea was is you had to marry the previous wife, widow, and you produced an offspring who became the heir. Now fulfilling that slot. Okay, so now we divide it again 3 ways. Got it? That's the tradition. If you don't follow that, this is creepy. There's a lot of creepy things, but if you know that, that helps. Okay. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. Okay? That doesn't mean biologically. He's saying it wouldn't be in his inheritance slot. It wouldn't be his. So, and I'm just going to read this. Whenever he lay with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so he put him to death also. Gone. Onan gone. Okay? Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For he thought, I'm not going to give her to the killer woman. This woman's killing off all my kids, right? He may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. Go away. Go live in your father's house away. How long? Till Shelah grows up. Then I'll give him to you. That's the arrangement. But he's not old enough yet, and so that happens. Next verse. After a long time. Long time. So what would that mean? I don't know, but it's the opposite of a short time. Okay? So it's enough time, so Shelah is now grown up. After a long time, however, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, we never know her name, dies. She dies. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep. And his friend Hira, the Abdullamite, went with him. Okay, he's just going out, going to those things. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes. I don't know exactly what widow's clothes is. It's probably the opposite of big clothes because it's widow. Tough crowd tonight. Tough crowd. Yeah. Widow's clothes, whatever that looked like. She took that off. She put on different clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat down at the entrance to Eniam, which is on the road to Timnah. So she sits down this right in the front part of this city that's on the way to there. For she saw that. Why did she do that? You have to read into this now. For she saw that. She knew that means that Shelah had now grown up and she had not been given to him as his wife. In other words, there's no hope for me in this culture. There's no hope for me. I'm being bypassed. He's not going to give me the youngest son. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. And he said, I'll send you a young goat from my flock. She then says, will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked. And he said, what pledge shall I give you? And she says, your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand, she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her. And she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Okay, so this is crazy, right? Okay, so it's the father of the son who she was married to, of that she ends up sleeping with. She gets pregnant. Now, I'm going to skip a few verses just for sake of time. Judah tries to send someone to find her, to pay her the goat. She said, he comes to the city and says, I want to give you the goat now. Where's this prostitute that hangs out by the city gates? They say, there's never been a prostitute here. We don't need prostitutes there. And he says, what? Well, I don't know, whatever. I tried. And then he goes on. Let's go down to verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant. 3 months, right? 3 months, you got the little poochie thing going, right? There's 2 stages to being pregnant, right? There's cute pregnant, and then there's house pregnant. Oh, man, big as a house. I mean, big. They're just massive. When they back up, it just goes beep, beep, beep. I mean, they're just... But it's this cute little time right now. It's 3 months. She's showing. Everybody knows it. 3 months is enough time to show. And listen to what Judah says. You can't believe this. Judah says, bring her out and have her burned to death. Oh my gosh. She's a very, very smart woman. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I'm pregnant by the man who owns these, she said. And she added, she doesn't say what I would probably say, booyah. She doesn't say that. She says, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Now, Judah has been an absolute jerk in this whole rendition, the whole thing that's going on. And what's he going to do right here? And what we're going to see in the life of Judah is going to change the course of his life. We are not going to see Judah anymore like he was, how he responds here. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I. And he goes to the root of the problem. You might be thinking this is a cop-out to say, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah. You might be saying, wait a minute. You didn't repent. Repenting would have been saying, what am I doing with a prostitute? Let alone, what am I doing with you as a prostitute? And then what am I doing saying, I'm going to burn you to death when I'm the one that also was involved in this? That is true. He doesn't do that. But what he actually does is fascinating here. He actually says, the reason that this all happened is because I withheld my son. I forced her to do this. She's more righteous than I am. That's what he said. So it is a repentance here. He's getting at the root of it. And he did not sleep with her again. Good for you. Now, it's just a strange verse too. It's like, wow. So now she's pregnant. She's actually pregnant with twins. It says here in verse 29 that as she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the question then becomes, what does it mean to be the firstborn? It's a question. Does it mean any part? Or, because here one of them puts out his hand, and when that happens, the other one says, whoa, big dog, not so fast. So he puts out his hand in order to make sure that, because being firstborn was a big deal in that culture, the midwife takes and puts a scarlet thread around the wrist, all right? So the other one, it says he drew it back, and his brother came out instead. And she said then, so this is how you have broken out. Broken out, his name is Perez, which means broken out or breach or giddy up. And you can just see they're having a cage match or a womb match in there, and they're going back and forth. I'm getting out. No, I'm getting out. And the other one gets out first, Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was given the name Zerah. Now, it's amazing that out of this account, again, we have no children yet born in this whole account of the people of Israel who are born, I don't know, anywhere near the way people are supposed to be born. Maybe if the people love each other and care for each other, aren't doing it out of jealousy or envy or strife or none. This one's the worst. This is the worst, right? Temple prostitutes and lying and going to burn the mother and, oh my gosh, and then scarlet threads and all this kind of deal. This is the genealogy of Jesus, folks. Matthew chapter 1 tells where Jesus, what his physical lineage is. And it says this, it says Abraham is the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. No other mothers are named, right? Could have named other mothers. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, right? Doesn't do that. Jacob, Rachel, right? Doesn't say that. We get Tamar. Why? Because Matthew's laying the dirty laundry out. It's huge dirty laundry. Judah, the father of Perez, and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, now we're going to go through Perez, the guy who pulled the other brother's arm out and shot out, right? Going to go through Perez. Then we're going to get King David in that line. David's the father of Solomon, and then the Bible outs that, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Doesn't even say Bathsheba. It says Uriah's wife, who David capped in order to get her. It's this horrible story in the Old Testament. And Matthew wants to let you know, hey, that's who the line of Jesus coming through. Solomon's the father of Rehoboam, and it goes on. And Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who's called the Christ. It's amazing. We'll see in the end, we'll see next week, that all the brothers, and we think Joseph's going to be the guy, because Joseph actually makes some significant turns here in the end of the book. He becomes a light in this very dark book. Judah's going to be the one that is chosen to say, and all your brothers will serve you, and that's going to be the line. Wow, really? I would have picked, I don't know, any of the other ones, except for Judah, and Judah's the one. Just a side note, I was thinking this when I drove home today. No other service got this. You guys get it for free. Nothing. Doesn't cost you anything more. If God can use and forgive Judah wherever you're at, I don't know if you've wanted to either sleep with your daughter-in-law or burn her to death. Whatever you've done, this table screams enough for that. That just hit me. It's like, oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, we're all sinners, right? Judas and Steve, same deal. But it is easy to look at somebody else and go, yeah, but you're really a moron. Okay, I know. I am too. But put it in perspective. If that can happen, it can be true for you too. Now, that's just meanwhile back at the wrench. Now we're going to get what we're after today. We want to talk about Joseph. I wasn't sure if you'd know this reference or not, but I guess you do. So, little old movie there, but if you're familiar with the Joseph story, it goes quite a ways. We started last week where Joseph gets thrown into captivity, Genesis 37. It goes 14 chapters till the end of the book of Genesis, chapter 50. It's a lot, so we're obviously not going to be able to read all of it. Tonight we're going to look at a whole bunch of it. Just read the narrative. It's an unbelievable story. But next week we're going to kind of hit it. No, the whole point is God knows what he's doing. God's in charge of it all. But we want to look today in the bad part. What's going to happen with Joseph is, remember, he gets thrown into a well. We're coming back to Joseph now, part 2 of this account. And he gets thrown into a well. Things are going to look up just so that they can go even deeper. And things are going to look up, and then they go deeper. Okay, so it's kind of this, oh, man. And I think that's really applicable for us tonight, too, in your life and everything you're going through. I think this, what Joseph goes through in these years, that he's going through all these different difficulties, it's extremely applicable to us. So, after he gets sold into slavery, it just seems like, oh, happy, I'll make lemonade. It's not that bad, because it doesn't seem to be that bad. And so let's take a look at this. Oop, is that doing you? Yeah, all right, so here we go. Genesis 39. Where we're going to go, Genesis 39, and they're short chapters. And it's like a preacher saying it's going to be a short sermon. Anyway, and we're going to go through the middle of 41. We're just going to take a look at this. And what we're going to do, the New Testament a lot of times just gives you the bullet points of things and tells you. The Old Testament loves to give you story. And so if you don't follow the story, you won't get it. And some of you may not know this story. Many of you do, but I venture you've never really thought about it. Well, that's what we're going to basically do tonight is take a look at it, walk it through, and then we'll pick a couple themes, one of which is going to come out of the Judah and Tamar story, and then another one out of this, kind of the obvious one, which is just stuff happens. Life is hard. So here we go. Oops. Verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. So what's the deal? Okay, here you get. Pharaoh is king, okay? Next in charge is a guy by the name of, captain of the guard, one of the big officials, shouldn't say next in charge, but he's one of them, is a guy by the name of Potiphar, okay? He's not the guy, but he's the guy to the guy, okay? It's named a guy by the name of Potiphar. Verse 2, major verse in just trying to understand. You got to love technology. Okay, major verse in trying to understand what's going on. The Lord was with Joseph. We're going to see that line over and over. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. Now I'm just going to share how much. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes, and he became his intendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. That's it. What a gig, huh? All he worried about was, I'm going to have I want a baked potato tonight. I want lots of sour cream, lots of bacon, right? Bacon. I know for half the population I just lost you, you're not going to think of anything else tonight. But bacon, right? That's all he's thinking about. So what happens to Joseph? He gets put into the well. He gets sold into slavery. It looks really dark, and he rises. He's not the guy, but he's the guy to the guy to the guy in Egypt. All right? That's a pretty good gig. It's a pretty good gig. Potiphar doesn't do anything except worry about his meal plans. That's it. Everything else, Joseph takes care of. This is looking good. And then not so much. Okay? It goes south in a big hurry. Starts off good. Now, Joseph was well-built and handsome. I love that phrase. He was well-built. Sounds like a Buick, you know? Oh, was really well-built. Kick that tire. Joseph was well-built and handsome. Sounds good, right? And after a while, his master's wife, took notice of Joseph, oh no, and said, come to bed with me. Awkward, right? This is my boss's wife here. What do I do here, right? First of all, she's probably significantly a lot older, but that's really beyond the point at all. But it's just, oh my gosh, I'm in a no-win situation here, right? So, verse 8 says, but he refused. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in Genesis 39, verse 8. This is the first time anyone has had any sexual restraint whatsoever in the entire book. Seriously, it's the first time. And it's Joseph. And God's with him. And Joseph's getting a relationship with God, and it's changing him. And he refuses to do this. And he says, why? He says, with me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in his house than I am. My master withheld nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. I just kind of thought that was Captain Obvious here, that wasn't okay. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against, and it's interesting here, he gets where it's really coming from. God. Yes, it's going to be a sin against Potiphar, but really, it's an ultimate sin against God. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day, you always know nothing good happens when it starts out with one day, right? But one day, he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. So somehow, she's hanging on to assume it was like a robe or something. It could have been on too tight or too many sleevey kind of things. That would just be awkward. Like, she's pulling on. I don't know. It does leave a lot to the imagination. How did she end up with his cloak? But she does. And he runs out like, I am not going there. And she's had enough. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she figures, it's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. So I'm gonna show him. She called her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has brought to us, that has been brought to us to make sport of us. I don't know what sport they're going to play, but they were going to play a sport. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. Sometimes you just got to think about this. Is that really a good story? Let me see. I want you, baby, I want you. Ah! I know, I'll take off my cloak, and I'll put it there, and then I will run. But nobody thinks that through. Nobody thinks about that. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came. Potiphar comes home. Then she told him this story. That Hebrew slave you bought us, came to me to make sport of me. Once again, this sport thing. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. It's like, oh man, this was going good. And now, whoo, right back. Prison. He's going to do time. Now in that, here's this bright spot. There is unbelievable light at the end of this kind of tunnel. It says, but while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. There's that phrase. And what happens? He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. And he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care. Doesn't say it, but except probably for his own meal plan, like Potiphar. I don't know, bring me the head of a pig. Because the Lord is with Joseph. There's that phrase again, right? And gave him success in whatever he did. So God's with him in this, and he starts to rise again. Right? It seems like things are going up. Too soon. It is too soon, man. 1998 season, was it January 17th, 1999, but I don't know why. I remember that. It's a day marked. That is the actual moment, too. Do you remember where you were? I know some of you too young to remember this moment. I remember exactly where I was. It's just etched in my mind. It's like, he didn't. You've missed one all, and now you're wide left. Chip shot. Super Bowl. Champion. Winner. Viking curse gone. No. Anyway, that's enough of that. Okay, let's keep going here. Genesis 40. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king, Pharaoh now, that's the same. King and Pharaoh are going to be interchangeable here, of Egypt, offended their master. How? We don't know. Doesn't say. That's not the point. The king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So you have a cupbearer, and the cupbearer actually brings the cup to the king so he can have his wine, but he takes a sip of it first just to make sure there's no poison in the cup, okay? Right. It's a job where you want to make darn sure there's no poison in that cup, right? It's kind of like being on the bomb squad. You only get one oops. So you don't want to blow that job. The chief baker, he bakes. Not too complicated. But they somehow make the king angry, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. So they have a dream, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Joseph comes to them, and the next morning he sees that each one of them is dejected. So he says to Pharaoh's officials who are in custody with him in his master's house, it's interesting how it repeats that phrase, just to make sure you know, they're in jail too. Why are your faces so sad today? And they say, we both had dreams, but there's no one to interpret them. Now, Joseph, that's what he does, right? He has dreams about sheaves bowing down and about the 11 stars and the sun and the moon, this is what got him in trouble in the first place, right? And so he is a guy. He's the guy. And so he says, hey, do not interpretations belong to God? And he's implying here, I have a relationship with God. Tell me your dreams, and maybe I can interpret them for you. So they go ahead. The cupbearer goes first. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, in my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. Well, Joseph says, here we go. Here's what the dream means. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head. That means he's going to take you back and restore you to your position. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. This is good news for you. Now, something about me. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh, the king, and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. All right? Well, the chief baker heard that. And he saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation. So he says, oh, that's good. Now, this reminds me totally of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The moment where they come to the bridge, right? None shall pass. And he says, you have to answer 3 questions. And so the first one comes up, and they're all shaken. What is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color? Green. It passes. And Sir Lancelot says, that's easy. Comes up there. What is your name? Yeah, Sir Lancelot. What is your quest? We seek the Holy Grail. What is the average speed of an African swallow in flight? Well, I don't know. Doing. That's what's going on here. Exactly what's going on here. Well, that's easy. That was awesome. I'm going to tell him my dream. So he tells him his dream. I too had a dream. And on my head were 3 baskets of bread. Must be 3 days, right? In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Huh? And Pharaoh says, yeah, or Joseph says, yeah, that's what it means. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Guy's like, yes. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree. And the birds are going to eat away your flesh. Can I get a second opinion? Is there anyone else here, right? Well, that's what happens. No, the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday. And he got a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, means he takes them out of prison and he brings them to his presence. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged. That word is a little difficult in the Hebrew. Could mean impaled. The chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. This looks like it's going really well, right? Looks like it is going to be going well for Joseph. And then the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So it's like he's standing there going, I know there's something else. I can't. In the great words of the great theologian Homer Simpson, don't. Okay, so totally he's back down. He's stuck in there. Now, next part of the story. Pharaoh has a dream. After 2 full years, the guy forgetting about Joseph costs him 2 more years of hard time. After 2 years had fully passed. After 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. And now it's going to share the dream. It's actually 2 dreams. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. And after them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came out of the Nile also and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke from his dream. Whoa, no more pizza. Okay. He fell asleep and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. And After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. Okay? So what's going on here? He has this dream. No one can interpret it. I found that. No, I made it. He tries to find people to help him. He says, in morning he was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and the wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them about his dream, and no one could interpret it for him. And then the chief cupbearer says, oh, dude, forgot about that guy. Today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. And he tells the account. He says, Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. So this seems like a good idea. And Pharaoh goes to the bullpen. Give me the left-hander, right? Bring up this guy. And there we go. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. I love the details sometimes Scripture gives. I have no significance whatsoever other than it's probably a good thing to shave, change clothes before you see Pharaoh. Just interesting little fact. Okay, comes before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now listen to what's happening with Joseph. Joseph is becoming a man who understands his place in what God is doing. And he says, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Could this be actually a bright spot in the book of Genesis? A guy who's finally starting to get it. So Pharaoh tells him the dream, and he just reiterates the dream, and I'm just to save some time, I'll go past it. It is interesting, though, how he interprets the dream in verse 19, just a kind of little interesting note here. He says, after them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I have never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. Okay, so he just wants to make that clear, like, hoo. Okay, he tells him the second dream, also about the heads of grain and all that. Now, and Joseph is going to interpret it for him. The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came out afterward are also 7 years, and so at the 7 worthless heads, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming to the land of Egypt. But 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. Pharaoh, 7 amazing years are coming, and then 7 more years are coming. Then he gives him advice. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, the whole country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country will not be ruined by the famine. Now, that's as far as we're going to go with the Joseph narrative tonight. I'm going to just give you a little bit of foreshadowing for next week. Next week on the life of Joseph, we're going to see that this actually seems like a good idea to him. Who could be that guy? Joseph's going to be that guy. So remember, he was the guy to the guy to the guy? Now he's going to be the guy to the guy. He's risen even past all that. But it was a mess to get there. All right? It was a mess to get there. We'll talk about that next week. So I want to talk about themes that are developed in the Bible. What are some of the things you can take from this? There's a ton. Just by reading those through, there's a ton probably already that God is even working on you with, and that's fine. But I want to highlight two things, and one that's just I have to say. You have to get this. The big idea of the Joseph narrative, we're not going there tonight because I'm going to land on it next week, big. But the big idea of the Joseph narrative is God is in control. Clearly. When we get to the last chapter of Genesis chapter 50, it will nail this concept. And when you get through all the book of Genesis, you go, oh my gosh, all that darkness and everything, God knows what he's doing. And he uses even things that are evil. I'm not saying that he delights in evil, but he uses it. And he gets to his end. Even evil. That's the big idea. God is in control. He absolutely knows what he's doing. Okay, that's the big idea. That is clearly the big idea of what's going on. We're in the middle part of this. We did something last week. This week, we got another one. I want to kind of highlight the things we covered this week. The first thing is the Judah and Tamar story, an unbelievable hypocrisy. Burner! Really? Really? Can you say that when you are as guilty, if not more, than her? And in case you are, because you caused all this to happen. And the second thing is, man, stuff happens. What do you do with that in life? What do you do with when you're doing this, and then back up, and then this, and back up? What do you do that? What is that about? Okay? So let's start with hypocrisy. Let's start with hypocrisy. Proverbs 26, it's one of the famous passages on hypocrisy. I'm only going to read the first verse. You can look at it while I'm talking here. Proverbs 26, verse 23 says this, like a coating of glaze over earthenware are fervent lips with an evil heart. Okay, so what's that saying? It's saying like there's a thin glaze over pottery, and it makes it look a certain way, and that's what fervent lips that say one thing, but underneath is something else. It's deceptive. It's the definition of hypocrisy. What is hypocrisy? Hypocrisy is a mask, wearing a mask, or being something, or showing yourself to be something that is not at all accurate with what's really going on. You are hiding. You are a poser. And everybody in this room, to some degree, wrestles with this. Some of you are completely locked into it. I mean, it is who we think you are is not at all who you are. But every one of us is on, we got a hypocrisy meter somewhere, okay? We're all Judah to some degree. I've never tried to burn anybody, but we are Judas to some degree. When you get to the New Testament, it gets even more frightening. Because who's Jesus after? In Matthew 15, he goes after people, and he says, you hypocrites. And who's he talking to? This is frightening now. He's talking to religious people. Okay? Jesus hangs out with the sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes. He doesn't yell at them. He yells at the church people. Last time I checked, we're in a church right now. So it's like Jesus yelling at us. You hypocrites. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, and he quotes from Isaiah 26, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men. All right? That's how they worship. Wow. I remember coming across this passage as a brand new follower of Jesus when I was in college. And I remember it shocked me thinking that God does not actually care about your lips and how you look. He wants your heart. Whoa, that's heavy, right? He doesn't want posers. He wants you to live real. Wow. Now, I'm going to step on toes here, and that's not my intention. I hope you can hear me. Please, I'm not trying to step on toes. But for me, and some of you have had just a wonderful experience, rich and beautiful. But for me, I grew up in a tradition where we recited different things during a worship service. And one of them was a prayer of confession. Some of you come from a tradition similar, and you had a fantastic time with that. Praise God. I'm This is me. This is me. I'm messed up, okay? It's me. But we'd say things in this prayer of confession that was, it would say what I've done during that week. And it's like, really? And I remember hearing the whole congregation monotonically saying this out loud in confession to God. Now, and like I say, I'll say it one more time, then I'll stop being Norwegian. That some of you might say, this quickens my heart to God. It just hopes, I say those prayers and they're really helpful. Praise God. For me, it was the epitome of religiosity. It was the epitome of I'm saying something and then I'm okay with God. It was the epitome of me like coming to my wife and handing her a flower and saying, roses are red, violets are, can't read my handwriting. Now that's me. Okay, that's my hang-up. And I have tried my whole Christian life to do anything I can to not be a poser. And you know what? We still wrestle with this. Why? Because religion and being part of a church or singing songs or just being part of a worship service or da-da-da-da-da-da is filled with ways that I can all of a sudden start to say, I'm okay on the outside. I'm not really going to let people see the inside at all. That's hypocrisy. What's the solution to hypocrisy? The gospel. Why? Well, let's talk about hypocrisy for a second. What's actually going on when I'm being a hypocrite? When I'm being a hypocrite, I'm putting on a mask. I'm letting you see something that isn't really accurate, and I'm wanting you to see a certain way. Why? Because there are things behind the mask that I don't want you to see. Why? Well, because if you saw those things, you would not think the same of me. Well, why does that matter to me? Because ultimately, what's most important for me is what you think about me, what others think about me. What does the gospel say? What is the message of Christianity? The whole point of it, what does it say? The whole point of it is that every one of us is a sinner. Every one of us. And Jesus Christ came to die for sinners. Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it what? Kinda? No, he washed it white as snow. Right? The gospel says that the God of the universe looks at me and says, you're clean, you're forgiven, you're wiped out. You don't need to be a poser because if I say you're okay, you're okay. And somehow, when I have to be okay before you, what I'm actually saying is, your opinion of me is more important than God. That's how hypocrisy is so dangerous. You're actually creating idolatry by saying, that person, what you think, means more to me than what God says. This table screams, stop being a poser. Let it go. Take off the mask. Second issue. The difficulty of life. The difficulty of life. Great quote by John Wayne. You and I firmly believe something. And here's what we believe. We believe somehow deep within us that life might be difficult for everybody else, but ultimately for me, it shouldn't be bad. It should be good. You ultimately believe that. Yes, life sucks, but somehow it shouldn't for me. It just shouldn't, right? When my window gets broken and I look over there and see broken glass and I see a spot where there used to be a briefcase, I don't say, oh, I guess we're in a fallen world. Oh, I see that. I bet you that person needed that more than me, right? That's not what goes through my mind. The first thing goes through my mind is, oh, man, what a hassle this is going to be. I know my next week is just going to be ruined. This sucks, right? And somehow, because we're American or because we're Christians, we just think that we're exempt from the suckage. We are not exempt from the suckage. I don't know where we get that from, but I believe it. All the time when something bad, it's like, what's this about? This isn't supposed to happen to me. Who's it supposed to happen to? I don't know, the car next to me. Sorry, dude, but not me, right? You believe it. You firmly believe it. I don't know why. It's nowhere in the Bible. Nowhere. Psalm 27. Psalm 27. Psalm 27, or excuse me, Psalm 23, excuse me, starts off with this beautiful, Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. Makes me lie down by green pastures, nummy, nummy, nummy. I get to be by still waters, right? Oh, it's just, he's going to restore my soul. It's just beautiful, right? First 3 verses. Then come to verse 4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Do you ever stop and think about that for a second? The passage is talking about a metaphor. The metaphor is you're a sheep, God is the shepherd. Okay? So where is the shepherd taking the sheep? To the valley of the shadow of death. That's where the shepherd is leading his sheep. There's the valley. Where are the sheep? Down to the bottom. Where are all the wolves? Up here. Valley of shadow of death. Where's God walking you? Through the valley of the shadow of death. Well, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. There it is again, right? For you are with me. Where? In the valley of the shadow of death. That's where you feel him. And your rod and your staff, they comfort me. When? When I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. Jesus promised, in this world you will have trouble. I promise you, you will have trouble. It's going to happen. We have to believe that. In God's amazing providence, and ever, I'm reading through different parts of the Bible, and this whole week, I've been reading a chapter a day. I wake up first thing in the morning, and I'm reading through Lamentations. Now, if you've never read Lamentations, make sure you're on your medication, because I'm telling you, Lamentations is dark. It is dark. It is after the time when people have come and taken over Israel because they've been so disobedient. God is kicking them out of the land. And it's this constant lament, chapter after chapter after chapter. And in chapter 3, he says this. He says, I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. In the midst of what? The valley of the shadow of death. In the midst of that. Because of the Lord's great love, we're not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I'll say to myself, the Lord is my portion. I have enough. The Lord is my portion. Therefore I will what? Wait for him. Do I have it now? No. Where am I? Valley of the shadow of death. Not there. Wait. Now, you got to keep reading in Lamentations and see how hard this gets. The Lord is good to those who hope is in him. What's hope? Future. Not now. To the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. And then it says, it is good for a man to bear the yoke while he's young. Why? Because you understand God, and you understand that he's going to move in his time frame. I guarantee you, God's time frame is never yours. The old Southern Baptists have a great phrase. God is never late, but seldom early. Right? Never. When you get to the New Testament, you get Paul, and this was a passage as we went through 2 Corinthians, as we finished up 2 Corinthians I think it was last spring or this summer, seriously ministered to me. And it just said, keep me from being conceited. He had these amazing visions of God, but in spite of that, God says, not to let you be filled with yourself. There was given to me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. Something was ripping Paul apart on the inside, whatever it was. We don't know exactly what it was. If you're going through something really deep, this is what it is, tearing him apart. And it says 3 times I pleaded with God to take it away. 3 times. Could mean 1, 2, 3, or 3 times could be a way of saying, I constantly, morning, noon, and night, ask God, take this away. And God's answer is no. My grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness. Having you in prison, Joseph, is exactly where you need to be right now. That's exactly where you need to be. Having you in a well, is exactly where you need to be right now. Paul says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, insults, and hardships and persecutions and difficulties. Why? For when I'm weak and in a fetal position, sitting there going, God, help, that's when I'm strong. That's when I'm strong. History of our church has that. I distinctly remember when we were over at the University of Minnesota and trying to figure out what we were going to do about space issues. Trying to figure out with a church that is very unique financially and with the mix-up of a lot of college students, a lot of young people, not a lot of money, how are we going to do a space for this church? And I distinctly remember that we found a space over at the University of Minnesota. It was right behind the ramp C, if you know where that is. It was an old church building. It had been out of business for like 20 years. It was totally ripped apart. And so we put an offer in on it. The offer was $1. Surprisingly, we didn't get it. And I remember holding the rejection letter, and I was just crushed. We didn't get this property. That property held 125 people, by the way. It would have, no way it would have worked. We got excited about a second property and had not a chance to get it to a bid, but totally had that door shut down. And I just felt despondent. God, what are you going to do? And what's God doing? God's wait, and literally it was 7 years. 7 years of famine first, and then the 7 years of feast now. But the 7 years of famine where we couldn't figure this thing out. And God was preparing in the hearts of a congregation that we didn't even have a connection with to close. Not only did they want to close in this building, but they wanted to pass on their legacy, and they wanted to give the property to another church. Not just give the property. They came in and cleaned it. They gave us a Steinway piano. They gave us a van. They had money in the bank when they closed, and they gave us all the money. Now, does waiting for God always lead to puppy dog and rainbows? No. And yes. Ultimately, I believe God knows what he's doing. And in some way, shape, or form, yes, it'll work out. But in that exact moment, does it work out? So as we close tonight, as we prepare to respond tonight with a couple songs and chance just to let this all sink within your heart, I've got a couple questions for you to meditate on. You meditate on these questions. And whenever you feel like, God, yes, I'm ready, I want you to feel free to come forward and to take communion tonight. You want to take communion for people who are saying, God, I'm in with you. I want to follow you. I'm taking off. Let me give you the couple questions here. I'm taking off my hypocrisy. God, I trust you. I worship you. And when other people look down on me, that hurts. But you've spoken. So today I'm laying down hypocrisy. I'm also, God, going to stop demanding of you all the circumstances in my life to be exactly right. Remember what happened to Joseph. The Lord was with him in the midst of these hard things. God is with you. That's the promise. My power is made perfect in weakness. It's sufficient. So when you wrestle through these things and you're ready, come forward, or we have a table in the back. That one has gluten-free area with a little bit of bread there. You can have gluten-free if you need that. Use as a way to say, yeah, that's me. I want to be in on that. You're saying yes to Jesus Christ, whether for the very first time and you become a follower of Jesus tonight, or for the 1,000th time, saying yes to him. I want to do that. Let's pray.